Usually when we think about a fortress, there's this expectation of absolute security, like ancient engineering, you know?
Yeah.
You build the stone walls really high, you pull up the heavy wooden drawbridge, and the architect just points and says, there it is, nothing is getting in, you are completely safe.
Right. It's totally impenetrable. I mean,
Yeah,
the whole logic is that if you can just keep the outside world out, you remain completely protected from any potential harm.
exactly. But if you step into the world of human psychology and cultural expectations, suddenly that fortress is a trap.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you build the walls, you pull up the drawbridge, and then you realize you are actually locked inside. You're looking at this defensive structure that hasn't kept the danger out at all. It's actually just locked the danger inside with you.
Right. It becomes this self-imposed dungeon. The very mechanisms that were designed for protection end up causing the isolation and ultimately the damage.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we are decoding a fortress that millions of people have locked themselves inside, which is the myth of the strong, silent man. We're looking at excerpts from a really fascinating essay titled The Silent Man, Masculinity and the Myth of Withholding.
It's a great piece.
It really is. And we're going to figure out why culturally we equate withholding our thoughts and emotions with strength. Like whether you are a man trying to understand your own habits or someone trying to understand the men in your life. Our mission today is to explore how this specific myth traps people. We'll see how silence morphs from a simple, inability to find the right words into a highly toxic self-definition.
And crucially, why the simple act of having a conversation is a necessary biological and psychological function.
Exactly. This is going to fundamentally change how you view the act of venting. So where do we start with this?
Well, the author's entire premise really hinges on this idea that masculinity in modern culture operates as an empire of myths.
An empire of myths. I like that phrasing.
Yeah, it's powerful because we aren't just dealing with like one or two little misconceptions. It is a massive overlapping kingdom of false ideas that men are expected to navigate and embody. And within that empire, the archetype of the, quote, uncommunicative man is arguably the most pervasive.
And the most dangerous.
Exactly.
Because we are incredibly conditioned to revere that specific guy, aren't we? The text points out the cinematic connotations we attach to the uncommunicative man. Think about it. The implication is always that his silence makes him mysterious.
Right, makes him strong.
Yeah, he's strong, he's cool, he might be lonely, but it's always framed in this deeply glamorous, romanticized way.
The text actually highlights how the word man already carries a tremendous amount of cultural weight and expectation just on its own.
Yeah.
But when society tacks on a qualifier, uncommunicative, the complexity just multiplies.
How so?
Well, the underlying myth dictates that not talking, like refusing to express internal struggles and supposedly succeeding in total isolation, that is the ultimate proof of manhood. Yeah, the logic is basically the less you say, the more of a man you supposedly are.
Right, and the author specifically points to that 2011 movie Drive as an example.
A perfect example.
You picture Ryan Gosling driving around Los Angeles in the neon lights, wearing that shiny scorpion jacket, just gripping the steering wheel. I mean, he barely says 2 consecutive words for the entire runtime of the film.
No, he doesn't. But the audience projects an incredible amount of emotional depth and intelligence onto that character precisely because he gives them nothing.
Right.
We fill the void of his silence with our own assumptions about his inner strength and his stoicism.
Okay, let's unpack this aesthetic. Because I read that part of the source, and I immediately thought about it like a modern Instagram filter.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Right. Because on the outside, to the viewer scrolling past, the silent man aesthetic looks incredible. It's dramatic, the lighting is moody, the contrast is super sharp, but it is entirely artificial. It's a digital overlay that actually requires a massive amount of processing power to maintain. Like underneath that filter, there is just a normal, messy, everyday picture.
Exactly. The aesthetic is doing all the heavy lifting, masking the actual reality. And the author argues that maintaining that filter living under the yoke of this specific myth, it has severe consequences.
Yeah, the text gets into how historically pop culture has framed understanding women as this great, unsolvable cultural challenge.
Right, the classic trope.
But the text suggests that because of these accumulating myths, men are adopting these silent postures and becoming artificially complex. Like they're turning themselves into a new riddle to be solved.
Which is such a fascinating flip. The author draws a really sharp line there, stating that this increasing complexity in men is a sign of, quote, accumulation and problems.
Okay, wait, I want to clarify that. How does the author differentiate between someone who just have normal, everyday problems and what they label a problematic man?
That's a crucial distinction. The baseline human condition involves having problems.
Yeah.
Literally everyone has them.
Right, a flat tire, a stressful day at work.
A disagreement with a friend, exactly. But an uncommunicative man crosses the line into becoming a problematic man when he absorbs the myth of silence into his actual behavior.
So instead of just dealing with it,
Right. Instead of addressing the flat tire or venting about the work stress, he accumulates the frustration internally. He flat out refuses to vent it. So his refusal to communicate actually becomes the problem itself.
he takes a straightforward, solvable issue and turns it into a dense, internalized puzzle.
Exactly. He makes himself the problem.
The author writes that if a man chooses uncommunicative as his defining modifier, the only appropriate response is, good luck.
Which is so blunt.
It is. There's a level of
Sure.
tragic irony there. It moves us away from why this archetype looks so cool on a movie screen and gets into the actual psychological trap. Because, let's be real, I doubt anyone just wakes up on a random Tuesday and decides, I'm going to become a cinematic loner now.
No, of course not. The text outlines a very specific psychological progression here. It charts this crucial transition in a person's life where the actual effort to tell their story simply dies.
It fades out.
Yeah, it rarely starts as some grand philosophical stance or like a conscious decision to be a stoic warrior. It almost always begins as a circumstantial inability to explain.
Like a moment where the words just aren't there, or maybe the environment isn't right.
Exactly that. It could be driven by shame over a failure or embarrassment, or maybe a genuine belief that a specific feeling is just too complicated to put into words right then.
Right.
But tragically, it is often driven by simply not having a trusted listener available at the exact moment they needed one.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It is. The words fail, or the environment fails, so the story just stays inside.
And then the trap snaps shut. Because the text explains that this initial inability morphs into a new stage, which the author calls not telling. And that is the critical shift, isn't it?
This is the point of no return for this archetype, yes.
Because not telling stops being a temporary failure of vocabulary, and it becomes a permanent self-definition. It becomes the person's identity.
Precisely. The individual stops being someone who couldn't speak in a specific moment and becomes someone who doesn't speak. Period.
Wow.
The author actually offers formal condolences to this man in the essay, stating that he has become a complete victim of the myth. And to illustrate how deep this victimhood goes, the text uses this really striking metaphor.
The Hercules one.
Right. These men begin to view themselves as Herculean figures. They genuinely believe they are locked inside their own minds, valiantly battling massive, terrifying monsters all by themselves to protect the world from their internal chaos.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I need to push back on the author a bit here. What is inherently wrong with that Herculean mindset?
How do you mean?
Well, isn't there actual practical value in stoicism? Like, if I am dealing with my own monsters, isn't taking personal responsibility and fighting them internally better than constantly burdening my family or my coworkers with every single problem I have?
That's a totally fair question. But the author differentiates between processing an issue independently and hoarding it defensively.
Hoarding it.
Right. Stoicism, in its original philosophical sense, is about acknowledging a problem, recognizing what you can actually control, and moving forward. The myth of withholding that the author describes is not processing at all. It is pure suppression.
So it's just burying it.
Exactly. And the text explicitly argues that if these men were to bring those internal monsters out into the open through conversation, the entire Herculean fantasy would just collapse.
They'd realize they aren't fighting monsters at all.
Right. They would realize these terrifying mythical beasts are actually just, quote, small and large human problems.
It completely punctures the heroic illusion. It's like, okay, it's like being a kid lying awake in bed, absolutely terrified of this massive looming shadow in the corner of your room. Your heart is pounding, you're sweating, you are enduring this whole heroic battle in your mind just to survive the night. And then someone flips on the light switch, you look over, and it's literally just a pile of laundry on a chair.
That is the perfect analogy. The act of sharing the story is flipping on that light switch. The text notes that the immediate result of verbalizing the issue and realizing it's just a normal human problem, just a pile of laundry, is profound relief. The tension dissipates instantly.
But by clinging to not telling as an identity, they refuse to flip the switch. They choose to stay in the dark with the shadow.
Yes. And the author is really definitive on this point. Not
Yeah.
telling your story does not make you a hero. It does not make you stronger.
Yeah.
It transforms you into a blocked, depressed victim of your own silence.
You are suffering under the weight of an illusion you are actively choosing to maintain.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for us functionally? Because if keeping these stories inside creates this blocked, depressed identity, what is it actually doing to us on a physical level? The text transitions from the psychological trap into an argument that this is actually a biological issue.
It does. The author approaches language and storytelling not just as social pleasantries, but as critical functional tools for human survival.
Really? Survival?
Well, functional tools for self-realization and processing reality. The text cites this proverb, tell your story and you'll feel better. And the author elevates this from just a nice folk saying to a biological imperative.
Okay, we have to dig into the mechanics of that because we usually treat talking about our feelings as something nice to do for our mental health, like a bonus, but the text calls withholding a literal loss of function.
Right, because the act of telling has such a profound impact on human physiology that it acquires a functional dimension. Think about it. When we experience stress, our nervous system reacts physically.
Cortisol spikes.
Cortisol spikes, our heart rate changes, our muscles tense up. We are literally holding a physical load. Vocalizing the problem, putting that abstract fear into concrete language and sharing it, acts as a literal pressure valve.
So it physically changes the body.
Yes. It engages the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what calms the body down. Therefore, the man who refuses to tell his story is experiencing a tangible loss of function. He is actively denying his physical body the release mechanism it evolved to use.
Wow. If speech is a biological and psychological mechanism like that, holding it in isn't just acting tough. It would be like refusing to blink or refusing to exhale and then wondering why your eyes are burning and your chest is in agony.
That's exactly it.
You are actively breaking your own machinery.
And then the text applies this concept of functional loss to this highly theoretical observation on gender dynamics, pointing out a massive contradiction in the myth of the silent man.
Oh, this part.
Yeah, the author quotes another saying, a man's possessions are out in the open.
Wait, hold on. We definitely need to decode this part of the source because the language gets really dense here. The text talks about men having natural additions that are external and evident, and it argues that mystery belongs to the, quote, realm of femininity.
It's very dense.
What exactly is the author arguing here? Are we talking about physical anatomy or societal roles or what?
It is a blend of biology and cultural history, at least within the author's specific framework. Let's break it down impartially. When the author says a man's possessions are out in the open and refers to natural additions, they are speaking to the biological reality of being male, the external nature of male anatomy.
Okay.
The author is using this biological reality as a metaphor for presence and externalization. The argument here is that if a man already has these natural biological realities establishing his sex, there is absolutely no functional need for him to layer on artificial societal qualifiers to prove he is a man.
Oh, I see. So society is basically putting a hat on a hat.
Exactly.
You're already a man biologically. You don't need to adopt a fake, silent, brooding persona to emphasize it.
Furthermore, the text warns that adding these artificial mythical qualifiers like being uncommunicative threatens to render the natural biological person dysfunctional.
Because it creates a conflict.
Right. It creates a system crash between what the body naturally needs to do, which is express and release, and what the cultural myth demands, which is complete silence.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the realm of femininity comment?
So the author suggests that the pursuit of being mysterious and internal is historically and culturally at odds with this externalized male nature. The text posits that the concept of mystery in this specific cultural context aligns more naturally with historical perceptions of femininity.
Okay. So even if we strip away the dense gender theory, the core point seems to be that by adopting this silent posture, men are fighting their own biological need to process the world.
Precisely. They're breaking their own machinery, as you said.
But the text doesn't let women off the hook entirely, right?
Yeah.
Because the author addresses the fact that there are women who also refuse to tell their stories.
Yes, the author makes a really distinct observation here. While there is a massive established cultural framework celebrating the uncommunicative man, there isn't really an equivalent cultural myth glorifying a woman who doesn't tell her story.
That's true. Society doesn't make big blockbuster movies praising the silent, brooding, mysterious woman in the same way it praises Ryan Gosling in Drive.
Right, it just isn't culturally coded the same way. Therefore, the myth of withholding as a source of strength is distinctly a masculinity myth.
So when women do withhold and they refuse to communicate their struggles, why are they doing it, according to the text?
The author argues that women who refuse to tell their stories are essentially attempting to adopt the male role to navigate their own problems.
Mhm.
They see society treating male silence as strength, so they put on that armor thinking this posture of silent withholding will somehow protect them too.
But it doesn't work.
It fails completely.
Right.
The text argues that because women are operating outside the specific cultural and biological framework that built this myth, adopting the silent posture is entirely useless for them.
It's just a role.
It remains nothing more than a costume. It isolates them without even providing the temporary artificial benefit of looking like a strong, silent hero to the outside world. It provides no function, no relief, and no societal reward.
Wow. Okay, so if withholding is a dysfunctional, physically damaging trap for men and a completely useless costume for women, the universal conclusion here is pretty simple. We have to talk.
We have to.
The author explicitly says, talk about it, you'll open up. But let's look at the practical application of this, because the text does acknowledge that there are things you simply can't tell everyone.
Right, you can't just trauma dump on everyone you meet.
Exactly. You can't just walk up to a barista at the coffee shop and unload your deepest psychological traumas while they make your latte.
No, please don't do that.
So how does the author suggest we actually break this functional loss without swinging to the extreme of inappropriate oversharing?
The author is actually very pragmatic about this. Indiscriminate oversharing doesn't serve the functional purpose of processing. It often just creates new anxieties for everyone involved.
Right.
You do not have to broadcast your internal world to strangers or acquaintances to regain your health. The text concludes with a highly nuanced point. The solution begins with the search.
A search.
Yes. Simply finding the right person to talk to is itself an indication of the desire to open up.
Ah, so the intent is the key.
Exactly. The mere act of looking for a trusted listener, acknowledging internally that you have a story that needs to be told, and carefully evaluating who is safe to tell it to, that is the crucial first step in regaining that lost function.
You're already breaking the habit.
Right. You begin to dismantle the myth the moment you prioritize the desire for connection over the false comfort of isolation.
Man, we've covered some massive ground today. We started by looking at the glittering cinematic appeal of the uncommunicative man. We explored why we are drawn to that aesthetic and how quickly it devolves from a temporary inability to speak into a toxic permanent identity where someone views themselves as this tragic, lonely hero.
And we examine the physiological reality that withholding is a literal loss of function. It denies the nervous system its natural release valve.
Yeah, refusing to exhale. We also translated some pretty dense theory to understand that layering artificial silent toughness over our natural biology just creates a system crash. And that's true whether you are a man falling into a cultural trap or a woman putting on a useless costume.
Absolutely.
Conversation isn't a sign of weakness. It is a vital, functional tool for self-realization.
The monsters in the dark lose their power the moment they are dragged into the light of a conversation.
Exactly. Just a pile of laundry. So for you listening, think about your own routines. Where are you currently holding back? Maybe it's at work where you feel like you have to be the stoic problem solver who never admits to being overwhelmed.
Or maybe it's with your partner.
Right, where you are hiding your stress under the misguided belief that your silence is somehow protecting them. Or maybe you are just trying to navigate your own internal anxieties entirely on your own. Remember that those terrifying monsters in your head are almost certainly just everyday human problems. Finding the right person to talk to isn't a failure of strength. It is the ultimate tool for getting your functionality back.
It really is the only way we effectively process reality.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, building on everything we've unpacked from this text. If the silent, uncommunicative man is just an elaborate myth we've invented as a culture to project an illusion of strength, what other everyday exhausting behaviors are you performing right now simply because you've bought into a cultural myth?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right. Like, where else are you ignoring what your own mind and body actually need just to maintain an aesthetic?
It really forces a reevaluation of all the armor we choose to wear.
Yes. Are you defending a fortress that is actually just a dungeon? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking for the truth behind the myths, and please remember to flip the light switch on those monsters. We'll catch you next time.